I've never seen a crazier so-called peace deal as the one that Donald Trump signed with Iran. And it's not just because he made this peace just when he had the Iranian regime by the throat, right? Had it at his mercy. In the past few days, for instance, under this peace, we've seen Iran actually attack 2 ships in the Strait of Hormuz. The US then bomb Iran. Iran then attacked 2 Gulf states with drones. And the US president himself sounded today like he's half expecting the whole peace thing to fall to bits as negotiators meet in Qatar around now, actually, to work out what it is that they're agreeing to with Iran's nuclear weapons and so forth.
The meeting in Doha is going to be perhaps important, perhaps not. We're going to find out.
But what's really big and barely reported is what's going on behind the scenes that could determine not just who takes over in Iran, which is the world's biggest terrorist state, but who takes over from Trump as the head of the world's most powerful military country. Now, first, the US. You may have seen last week US Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who wants to be the next president, succeed Trump, see Rubio at the signing of a peace deal with Lebanon that commits the Lebanese army to disarm and take over the territory of the Hezbollah terrorist army in the south that Iran actually funds to attack Israel. Except, of course, Hezbollah denounces this peace deal too, obviously, as does the Speaker of Lebanon's parliament. So, you know, I don't have that much hope in it. But what's important about this deal is that it trumps, so to speak, it trumps the peace deal that Rubio's rival to succeed Trump, his rival, Vice President J.D. Vance, that he made with Iran in Switzerland that says Iran and Hezbollah, they've got to just stop fighting straight away, which effectively left Israel at Hezbollah's mercy. So here's Rubio supposedly sending in the Lebanese cavalry to help, and if Hezbollah resists, well, of course, then Israel can go back to fighting. And Rubio, pro-Israel, then wins over Vance, more anti-Israel. Fascinating. But the split in Iran's leadership is even more dramatic. Trump's peace deal is with Iran's corrupt Speaker of Parliament, Mohammad Ghalibaf. But he's now been attacked by 60 of the 84 members of Iran's Council of Experts. That's a big body stacked with clerics which chooses the country's supreme leader, the Ayatollah, and says that Trump, it now says Trump must be killed. The Strait of Hormuz must be closed. The nuclear weapons program mustn't be scrapped. And if the government does any of this, if it sells out to Trump on any of this, it's crossed that red religious line. So it sounds to me, I mean, they were later rebuked by the Secretariat, you know, all that kind of stuff. But it sounds to me like the ultra religious extremists in Iran are losing power, but we shall see. Joining me is Peter Jennings, who's been a Sky News defence analyst now after being a top official in defence and intelligence, and I can't read out all his qualifications to speak to you tonight. But Peter, this is some strange peace deal where both sides seem to be arguing amongst each other if they even agree to it. How do you think this is going to shake out?
It's the peace deal you have when you don't have a peace deal, Andrew. I can't see any progress being made at Doha in the next 24 hours, or indeed as we go into the future, because the Iranians fundamentally are not prepared to give ground on the issues that the Americans most want them to, that is to say the nuclear weapons program, the ideology which calls for the destruction of Israel, the ambition to be the dominant country in the Middle East. It seems to me that is still locked into the Iranian leadership's thinking about what they need to do. And in fact, the opposition that you've referred to in Tehran is even more extreme in terms of what they want the country to do. Iran's objective, I think, here is to keep the Americans sort of locked into a process of talks which never quite resolve. And here I think the mistake that Donald Trump is making is that he's already front-end loading concessions to them. So, for example, Iran is now re-exporting oil. and earning the income that comes from the exploitation of that oil. So they're starting to rebuild their balance sheet. They're starting to, rearm and to make themselves stronger after the pounding that they received over the last few months. I think Trump has met his match when it comes to the art of the deal, and it's the Iranian leadership. So expect no real peace. Expect, I think, continued military clashes now and again, differences over negotiations, and that, I think, could draw out for most of the rest of this year. And probably Trump will accept that, because I think what he wants to do is to have things looking like they're more at peace than at war as they get to the American midterm elections in November. But fundamentally, no real change to Iranian ambitions.
Look, I tend to agree with you very, very much. For those who think that Trump is playing 4D chess, I'm trying to think, well, it could be that by giving them these oil sales now, he is strengthening the hand of that Goluboff character and undermining the ultra radicals that want him turfed out. So who knows? But I suspect you are actually right. Meanwhile, in Russia, Peter, this has been fascinating. President Vladimir Putin, he had his power challenged once before by, that Wagner Group boss, who then he blew the guy's jet out of the sky. So that was the end of that. But he's had his power challenged again after 4 years of war in Ukraine that he can't win. This time a veteran of that war, Alexander Lunin, is really no account whatsoever, but he warned Putin last week to meet him or else. Here he is.
Yesterday, I was met by representatives of the high ranks of the Ministry of Defense, of the security forces, and they gave a message to Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin that if he won't give an audience in a live broadcast where I will tell the whole truth about what is happening in our country. At the moment, tens, hundreds, thousands of our soldiers are in prison. They are punished by their commanders. They are sitting, rotting, being tortured and raped by the so-called Gestapo for refusing to carry out stupid, suicidal orders. Vladimir Vladimirovich, pay attention to this. Invite me to you. The consequences will be very serious. If in the near future I won't come to the Kremlin and won't give a speech, in a live broadcast next to you, the army will deploy its weapons against the Kremlin.
Peter, that video was viewed more than 10 million times. Other soldiers, Russian soldiers, were inspired to send Putin threats of their own, except Lunin has now been reportedly jailed. What does this tell you, though, about what Putin's authority is amounting to at the moment?
Well, I think the most telling statistic here is that the Russians are losing between 30 and 35,000 people killed in battle every month in the war in Ukraine, and getting nowhere. In fact, it's the Ukrainians which are on the offensive right now, pushing further and further into Russia with their drones, attacking Russian critical infrastructure, even attacking Moscow from time to time. And it seems to me that what this Russian individual, Alexander Lunin, has done has just pointed to the unsustainability of Russian military tactics. The Russian military has a history of rebelling against their leaders when the killing gets too great, and that is where I think they're at. Those casualty figures are just not sustainable. The other thing I'd say is that that video was 3 years to the day from the Wagner Group's brief revolution against the Russian government, where they started to drive towards Moscow and then ultimately were stopped. Lunin's future itself is probably pretty bleak, I imagine, Andrew. But I think the message that Putin will be taking from it is that he can't rely on his own military. And that to me says that he's really he's hanging by the fingernails here.
By a thread.
Yeah.
Bleak is a mild word to put on. I wouldn't be selling him life insurance just at this point. Peter Jennings, thank you so much for your time.